Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to today's meeting on the Special Committee on Climate Change. Today we have with us Steve Howard, Natalie Jameson, Hal Perry, Sydney McEwen, and Sunny Gallant. Welcome, members. I will get right into it. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Moved by Steve Howard. Thank you very much. And with that, I will get right into our first order of business. We are going to be having a briefing from the Quebec on the Quebec Zero Emission Vehicle Standard from the Quebec Ministry of Environment and Fight Against Climate Change. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to our guests. I will ask that you introduce yourself for the record, please, at the beginning, and I will have our committee members hold their questions until the end, if you don't mind. Perfect. And sorry about that. And with that, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'm Frédéric Dechamplain. I'm a climate change advisor, the Quebec Ministry of Environment. And I'm working on the ZEV standard with Marilou that will mainly do the presentation today.
Hey, hello. Marilou Gosselin. I'm the coordinator for the ZEV mandate in Quebec. I have echo. Okay. Do you hear me with echo? Maybe it needs to, okay, maybe, hopefully it goes better this way. I'm Marilou Gosselin. I work for the Ministry of Environment. I coordinate the team that works on the ZEV mandate, the ZEV standard. And I'll do the presentation today on our, so just to check, do you hear me right?
Yes. We're able to hear you perfectly. Thank you. Am I muted? I don't believe she can hear me. It tells me my microphone is muted on the screen.
I just want to know if you can hear me. You can, okay.
We're able to hear you. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to proceed. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to share the presentation that we sent a couple of days ago, and as said, we can answer all questions at the end if you wish so. Here is what we're going to go through. It's going to show up. So we're going to show you a bit about how we implemented our ZEV mandate and what we managed to achieve with it in the couple of years since it's been enforced. So the presentation will go through these points. So we're going to make a little intro on what are the GHG emissions in Quebec and why we decided to go with a ZEV mandate. A small part on the legislative process, how it came to be. And without going too much in details, I'll do a brief overview of how it works and how it is different from what exists in other states and provinces. And we had our first compliance period, a concept I will talk to you about a bit later, that ended last September, 1 year ago. And I'll give you the results that we had for this first period and briefly touch on what we want to do next. So the reason why we went for ZEV mandate is pretty much, as you can see here, transportation is one of the largest emissive sector in all of the Quebec economy. So transportation represents over 43% of all GHG in the province. You don't see the pie chart. In the pie chart for electricity, it's so small. We have a very clean electricity. It's 99.9% renewable. So transportation takes a lot of space. And of the blue part being transportation, road transport is over 80% of that total. So road transportation is also a big concern when we want to reduce our GHG emissions. And as is illustrated on the right-hand side, the light vehicles, maybe light trucks or automobiles, are 2/3 of that said road transportation, the rest being heavy-duty vehicles. So if we, when we decided to work on a ZEV mandate, we wanted to act on the light vehicle emissions for the vehicles that come on our roads from now on. Why a ZEV mandate? Well, as I said earlier, we have a very clean electricity. So every time we switch a car from an internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle, we have a gain in the emissions of the car, of course, but we also have a benefit because we produce our own electricity with state-owned utilities, and every benefit that comes with electrification being on the health side of the equation, because we have less pollutant and less noise, etc. So using our clean electricity is smart. And the ZEV mandate was one of the tools with the infrastructure implementation and the rebates for the incentives for the consumers to help reach the target of our transport electrification action plan that spanned from 2015 and is supposed to end at the end of this year. The goal of this plan was 100,000 vehicles, electric vehicles, maybe plug-ins or electric, being on the road at the end of 2020. I'll come back to you about how it's going in later pages. Why a ZEV mandate? Well, as I said, we had already acted in various policies, maybe the Climate Change Action Plan or other policies, to work on the demand, to help the consumers, to add charging stations, to add HOV lines, so people would be incentivized to take their cars to work and have an advantage that way. And we also had rebates, but still there were lineups at the dealerships because the automakers didn't always bring those cars in the dealership. So there were long waiting lists, and we didn't have all of the models of cars that we could see elsewhere, in particular in what we call the ZEV states, so the zero emission mandate states in the United States. The first and foremost being California at the time. So we could see that in their strategy, the automakers would put those electric cars in the dealership where there was a regulation in place, and it helped getting the cars in the dealerships. So to act on this, the supply side of the equation, we decided to do the ZEV mandate for the people have access to greater numbers and more electric vehicles in the market. And also how it works gives, we'll see really shortly, the ZEV mandates gives more credits for more performing cars with more range. So the ZEV mandate strives to push the automakers to do better and to have better models for the consumers. So how did it came to be? So as I said, the 100,000 vehicles on the road was in the Transport Electrification Action Plan. And in the said plan, we decided to put a ZEV mandate. But to put in place, we needed to adopt an act to give the power to the government to do so, and then the regulations itself. The choice was made since Quebec is, well, we're 23% about of new vehicle sales in Canada. So we have quite a bit of sales, but we're still a small market when compared to North America. So we wanted to come in and with the automakers to say, okay, we're going to put this in place, but we're going to do with something, So we decided to implement a regulation similar to the one that was in California at the time, and 9 other states at that moment. It went up a couple of states since. So, and the reasoning is, well, of this regulation and how it works already in 28% of the American market. So we're adding to that. It's not something completely new. So we wanted to go into seed in the same type of regulation. So we did something that is 95% copy of what is in California. The act was adopted in 2016, and then in the regulation were pre-published. We had comments, we had a bit of adjustments, and then we had those regulations come into force in the early 2018 in January, and starting with model year 2018 that were already sold in the market. So it was very fast, maybe not the ideal for the automakers, but they may do, and they didn't want a ZEV standard because the goal of the industry is to have as less regulation as possible. But once it's there, I can honestly say that they're trying everything they can to abide to the law and the regulation, and they've been very cooperative since it's been adopted. Now, for how it works, I won't go into much details on the technicalities, but I can answer every question you have at the end if you wish so. And you'll see at the end of the presentation, there our email, and we can also help with questions that could come to you after the presentation without a problem. Don't be shy. Me or Frédéric could answer you on any question that you can have. So as it's set right now, the ZEV mandate here in California, in British Columbia, all the ZEV states, it's not a question of a percentage of sales that is asked of the automakers. What we ask for is a percentage of credits. We ask for a number of credits. The subtlety is important because the credits are calculated, the requirements are calculated on the sales. So we apply the requirement to the total sales, but it gave a number of credits, and those credits can be either acquired by sell cars, so new or reconditioned in the case of Quebec, or buying credits from someone else. So an automaker could very well comply completely with the ZEV standard without selling one electric vehicles himself, but by buying credits from someone else. So it's not a percentage of new sales. And it's set up so it's for the medium and large automakers. We use the definition that was in California, but it applied to our market. So 99% of sales in Quebec are from medium or large automakers by our definitions. The small automakers, they can have credits too, but they have no requirements. So they can get those credits and sell them to other people. And that means that, for example, I'll name them, we'll see them later. Tesla is, for the moment, a small manufacturer. And it is an incentive for Tesla to sell those cars in Quebec, their Tesla Model 3, for example, because they can get those credits and then sell the credits to other automakers that are less fortunate in models, for example, and need credits. So it's to spur on the market. The credits, as I said, can be either obtained by buying them or by selling cars. And the number of credit per car changes with a formula. There's two formula. There's one for the all-electric vehicles that includes the battery electric vehicles and the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Those are the ZEV vehicles, zero emission vehicles. And you put the range in the formula and it gives you a number of credits. Then you have another formula, less generous, for the plug-in hybrids in particular. You put that range, the electric range, in the formula, same way, and you get some credits. But there's a limit by car. So at one point, the range is high enough, you won't get more than 4 credits for a zero emission vehicle, and you won't get more than 1.3 credits for low emission vehicles, meaning a PHEV. So that, when I was saying earlier, it's to push the market towards more performing cars. That's what we mean. So a long range battery electric vehicle gives more credit than a plug-in hybrid. As I said, we tried to go as similar to the American mandate, but we had subtle differences. Every time you put a new regulation in place, the automakers will say, well, okay, but can you recognize the effort I made before the law or the act came into force? And those are bonus credits. Those bonus credits are from previous year before the implementation, and we did give 4 years of bonus credits. And they could all be applied to the first year of the regulation. And then afterwards, we put in place what we call conformity periods. Conformity periods being a groupment of years when each year has requirements, but we ask the credits at the end of the period. So if one automaker is already ready, we're in the second at the moment, 19, 20, 21 model years. If an automaker has a couple of models already in place, can get a lot of credit in 2019, good for him. But if their models are coming in the upcoming years, it could be that they sell more in 2020 or 2021 and just get back their credits to comply on the period itself. So that was put in place to give a bit of leeway for the automakers to bring the vehicles to the market. Also, with putting on those compliance period, we put like a stop at each compliance period, and we decided that we want a maximum of older credits, so credits of older periods to attain their requirements. So in this case, like you can see in the middle of the slide, for the second period at the moment, only 35% of the requirement of those 3 years can be reached with using older credits. Why? Because we don't want them to sit on those older credits and say, okay, so I have plenty of credits, I don't need to sell vehicles anymore. No, we want them to continue selling them, and that's why we put a cap between periods, so they keep bringing those cars in, and the cap will lower to 25% in the third compliance period, and we'll see for the future. Also, Quebec was the first jurisdiction to give credits to reconditioned vehicle. Not one that was already been sold in the province, but one that comes in from another jurisdiction, for example, the Maritimes, Ontario, the United States. If it's registered for the first time in the province, then by the automaker with a set of criteria, they need a warranty, they need to, they have requirements for parts, they have requirement that the car might not be more than 4 years old, and also by the kilometers on the odometer. So we have at the moment a requirement that the car be less than 40,000 kilometers on the car to give credits. So that was something different from the American mandate. Now, those percentages of credits that I was talking to you earlier, so they go up on the various years. The 2014 to 2017 were bonus credits. That's why they're under the bar. But starting in 2018, we had 3.5% that we applied on the sales to get the number of credits. And it goes at the moment to 22% in 2025. And of those credits, you see the light green bar, a percentage starting here in 2020, a percentage of those credits needs to be from all electric vehicle, from zero emission vehicles. So again, to push the market towards the zero emission vehicles. But as I said at first, those are credits that are required. What we had calculated as sales is the light blue line. We knew since one car can give more than one credits, that asking for 22% of credits doesn't mean 22% of sales. There's a adequation to make there. So we had projected that in 2025 to be compliant with the regulation, they would need to sell about 10% of new vehicle sales to be compliant. And that was the estimate at the time. And frankly, it probably will be less now because the autonomy, the range on the vehicles are going up a lot faster than we thought in 2016. So the vehicles that give 4 credits per car are more and more there on the market. So it means it's easier to attain those requirements that we thought it would be. So what were the results? So we had estimated some sales in number of vehicles in the dotted line, and we saw that the industry went over those requirements. So they sold more in 2017 than we expected. That's a good thing for the market. Also, if we look at the percentage of sales with the statistic we have, we see that it's been increasing quite a lot. And in 2019, we're already at 6% of new vehicle sales being electric vehicles, all kind of electric vehicles. So that's a good news too. So our target of 10% in 2025 is now, not that ambitious. What did they earn as credits? You can see here that's a portrait that we put in our we put a bilan out. A report out for the first compliance period with the model year 2018 and the bonus credit years, and we see that the automakers easily managed to get all the credits they needed, which is the green bar on the left. They could have done it only with model year 2018. They didn't even need those bonus credits in the end. They really put those vehicles on the market and managed to get all the credits they needed. Which means when we look on the results on the report of the first compliance period, that if they had a requirement of 15,000 credits for the model year 2018, including the bonus credits, there are almost 59,000 credits. So they have a balance, very high balance of credits. So they're ready to use those credits in the current compliance period. It's a good thing we put a cap between them, so they cannot use all of those credits in the new period. They were a lot of vehicles sold by 14 automakers, so over 35,000 vehicles were declared to us to get those credits, a small fraction of them being reconditioned vehicles. And what's interesting is the number of the models that have been brought in the market. In 2016, we had about 60% of the vehicles offered, the models offered in California. For example, the e-Golf wasn't offered in Quebec. But now, a couple of years later, we have over 96% of all vehicles, vehicles sold in California that are offered also in the province of Quebec. So they are bringing those cars, maybe not at the level we'd hope, because there are still, right now, waits in the dealership, because they did attain their requirement. It was easy for them. They brought the cars, they attained the requirements, but it was maybe not as hard as it could be, so there's still waiting lines. So, but some automakers needed to get credits from other automakers. So those were the transfer credits between automakers. We can see that Tesla sold the lion's share of the credits. They sold over almost 16,000 credits to the other automakers in the lower part of the table here. And so, but it's also a sign that it was a good environment to sell Teslas in Quebec, because they knew. And how much did they sell those credits for? We don't know. We had the declaration. We sold, for example, 8,000 credits to Honda, but we do not know for how much money. But since one credits that due would be linked to a fee of $5,000 if they did not comply, we estimate that the transaction price could be around $3,000 or $3,500 for one credits, but we don't know. But we estimate this we've seen a financial report in the United States. It was about the amount that the credits was sold, but it's hard to determine. Still, in our compliance for the first period, every single automakers that was subjected to the regulation gave us the credits they had to give it to us. So everyone complied for the first year. Now, what does it do for the vehicles on the road? You can see here the progression of the vehicles sold. The green line is the total of the two other lines. So if you add up the ZEV and the PHEV, you get the total, the green ones. So we're COVID hit, as you see, it slowed down a bit the curve around March of this year. We were in good shape to reach our target. That was the X there, 100,000 vehicles on the road by the end of this year. We'll see if we get there. If not, we are confident that it won't be long until we reach the 100,000. But of course, the pandemic didn't help, sorry. So, what's interesting to see is since 2019, end of 2019, the all-electric vehicles took over the plug-in hybrids. So that's nice to see that the all-electric vehicles are being sold at a more rapid pace than the plug-in hybrids. Now, what's next? We need to strengthen the mandate. As you can see, it's been easy to reach the target, so we want to make it more stringent. We ask for in the province for feedback on the mandate and what they see as the future. We're currently working on a report that will be deposited to the National Assembly in January. It's in the Bill of Law, so it's required that after 3 years we deposit a report, and that report will have scenarios for the future. So we need to look into this. Will we do something for heavy-duty vehicles, as California announced in June? That's also something that we're looking into. And if we change our ZEV regulation, we have to start the legislative process again. So that would be starting as soon as next year. So, so as in the slides you have here are the links for a web page that gives more information. Links to the second link is the flyer that you might have seen because we sent it earlier this week. And there's also an email address that me or Frédéric or anyone in the team can see and answer you if there's any questions. But and the other two slides are more details on how to calculate the credits for the car, and I can go if you have questions on that too. So I'll keep it on the screen, or do I take out the presentation? How do you want to do this?
So I think at this point I will get
I don't hear you. Your mic is off.
You can unmute yourself in the upper right corner of on the screen.
Are you able to hear me now?
We don't hear you at the moment.
Do I need to unmute it? No. Are you able to hear me now?
No, I don't
No.
hear you.
On the upper right corner of the screen, there's a mic there that you can click on to unmute yourself.
Yes. Are you able to hear me? No. I cannot control that, so I will look to our audio-visual team.
We don't hear you. Oh, I think you should have it now.
Are you able to hear me? Wonderful. We have an audio-visual team supporting us. I apologize for that delay. Thank you for your presentation. That was fantastic. If it's possible at all, it would be great to have either of you on screen now. I know a number of our committee members will be very interested in this topic and have looked at bringing forward similar legislation. So with that, I will let Steve Howard ask you the first question. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this zero emission vehicle mandate is something that we've been pondering here on PEI, and one of the concerns that gets raised is how it might affect the local dealerships. I realize all of this has to do with the manufacturers themselves and whatnot, but the dealers would have to put in place infrastructure to be able to even sell the zero emission vehicles. Can you just let me know how that rolled out in Quebec whenever this change came into being?
Yes, so the dealerships were they did raise concerns when the ZEV mandate was put into place. They were afraid, among other things, would people want to buy cars that are not electric on the outside of the province, and that didn't came to be as far as we know. But the thing is that, as you said, the regulation is aimed at the automakers, and the automakers themselves need to support the dealership. So because of course they do have to put in place everything that needs to do with maintenance to these cars, to do to have a formation for the sellers, so the dealers, the people doing the sales, and we've been in constant contact with the Association of Dealership in the province. They've been integrated in our process. And we also put in place a committee with the Association of Dealership and the people from the civil, an environmental group, and we meet with them once or twice a year. And they took very seriously the need to educate the members on how to sell those vehicles. So they were implicated in the process, and I think they've done great strides. I'm not saying that there's not still hiccups. A colleague of mine tried to buy an electric car, and the seller tried to push them towards a nice car. It still happens. It can happen. But the regulation in itself, they have to understand that they do need help by the automakers. And one thing that we think helps in the way we set up our regulation is that to get the credits, the dealer, the automakers sends us all of the VIN numbers of the vehicles sold, and we check if those VIN numbers are in the Quebec database. Because that means not only did they dump those cars in the dealer's lot, those were sold to consumers. Because there's a concept in the American mandate where it's placed in service, which is sold, or delivered for sale, which is put in the dealerships. In the American mandate, they stop at delivered for sale. So if they, for example, I'll take like company X, put 100 vehicles in the dealership, and they say, okay, I've done my job, that's it. Well, the dealers have to sell those cars. And when we do the concept of placed in service, so that they have to be registered, it's not enough to just dump the cars to the dealership. They have to accompany them, maybe make better price, maybe form those dealers to sell those vehicles to the consumers. So we think it helps to have to put the condition of the credits as a vehicle that is on the roads, registered, and in the end of the process when they get credits.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. So another concern from the dealers is some have made changes already to have that infrastructure in place and made the investments themselves as dealers. And I wouldn't want to place any undue burden or penalize them for being early adopters. So I liked the fact that there seemed to be a 4-year retroactive aspect to your credits that you had. Was that to address that kind of disparity?
Exactly. It was to, but not necessarily as dealers, but as automakers. If you go back in 2016, there were a lot less models, but some were in the forefront. Let's name them. Like you had GM and Nissan that had sold a lot of vehicles, and says we were there. We did the research and development. We did the effort to bring those vehicles in the market, and we should get a reward for it. But the early action credits, the bonus year credits that we gave the automakers was to recognize that they had made an effort. But it's also a problem, not a problem, but it still gave the industry a lot of credits. So it's something you have to tread lightly. For example, and when we gave credits for model years 14 to 17, it was a lot less vehicles than, for example, if you do the last 4 years starting now, it would be a lot of vehicles. So when British Columbia put forward their own program that is very similar to ours until 2025, exactly the same until 2025 at various with various subtleties, they gave only 1 year of bonus credits, being 2019, because there was a lot of sales in that year. And if they gave 4 years, would give them a very nice cushion of credits, which every time you give a bonus credits, your own your objectives are compromised a bit. So you have to be careful with the early action credits, but it's still there to help the ones that did an effort before the mandate.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if you noticed a difference or were tracking the trends in, say, light truck sales, just other types of vehicles in the market. Did having this kind of mandate in place affect what people were buying beyond just simply electric?
Unfortunately, the trend of SUVs and trucks is still here and present in Quebec. Even though those 6% of cars for the moment are more of a smaller type of cars, but more and more in the following years, even the electric vehicles, they're going to go to SUVs and pickup trucks and stuff like that. So it's we're not really tracking the models that the overall portrait of the fleet, but we are asking in the regulation for the automakers to tell us of all of their sales, even the gas-powered vehicles. So they are declaring how many of each model they sold. So in the future, we might try to look at those trends and to see if it's at a lower pace of increasing as in comparison to jurisdictions with no ZEV mandate. But we do not really have that. But we do observe more and more SUVs and pickup trucks, even though we have the ZEV mandate. Hopefully soon, plug-in pickup trucks and SUVs or all-electric SUVs and pickup trucks. We'll see.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. I'm really interested in the used aspect of this here as well. So when a used vehicle is sold and there's a credit generated, it's a full credit, I'm assuming, as it would be as long as it meets your criteria here. Who gets that credit? Like, does that go to the automaker? That doesn't add up in my head right away.
It's always to the automaker. So, but and it's not one credit for one credit. We have a sliding scale with the mileage for the moment. So if it's under 10,000 kilometers, it's 80% of the credits. If it's between 10 and 20,000 kilometers, then it's a little bit less credits. And if it goes down by slice like that, and between 30,000 kilometers and 40,000 kilometers, which is the maximum, it's 50% of the credits of a new one. But the credit goes again to the automakers because the regulation in the act regulates the automakers. So they're the ones who have to send us the VIN numbers. Of course, they're helped by their dealerships because, but since we ask for criteria for the used market, we need the warranty to be there, the various parts to be there. We want them to check the kilometers, so we want them to do the report. We are pretty much certain that the dealership will tell their head offices we sold those vehicles, and then the automakers do ask for the credits, and the credits go into the account of the automaker. The problem it's made that way because if we are touching the automakers, we have 18 or I think people we talk to. We talk to Honda, we talk to Ford, we talk to Tesla. So we have 18 people. If we would give credits to dealers, we'd have 800 of them. And we cannot deal with 800 different people. So it all goes to the automaker.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think those kind of numbers would be the same here on Prince Edward Island, but point taken. The folks I'm thinking of are like the non-dealership or the auto manufacturer dealerships, just the used car salesmen themselves that aren't tied to any particular automaker. How does that interplay there?
Well, we are not close to the fact that an independent seller could sell a reconditioned vehicle that meets all the criteria, but it would have to go to it would still have to go to the automaker. So and in fact, let's say you bring back your vehicle. You have I don't know, you have a Nissan Leaf and you change it to get a Chevrolet Bolt. You want a Bolt, and you bring your Leaf as an exchange, and what that wouldn't really, and or it's a vehicle. So that it would need to be from outside of the province, but still, if a dealership ends up with the vehicles from another make, they could very well. It didn't happen yet, but they could, for example, Chevrolet could declare a Leaf and get the credits for it because they're the one who sold it, reconditioned with the warranty. But it didn't happen yet. But we're not close to that. But still, for the moment, it all goes through the head office of the automakers. So if they do partnership with independent resellers, they could get those credits, but they would be the ones responsible for the warranty and to make sure the vehicles met the criteria.
Yeah, just to add that the objective is to reward the person, the automaker that made the effort to import the vehicles in Quebec. So in theory, like a local dealer that import a vehicle, so it's not related to an automaker. Like that vehicle shouldn't get credits. We want to reward the automaker when he does himself the effort to import the vehicle in Quebec.
Steve?
Thanks.
Sydney?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to follow along with Steve's questions a little bit. And as Steve had mentioned, we're looking at this type of legislation here in Prince Edward Island. And our sizes are quite different. So like I think it was about 442,000 new vehicles were sold in Quebec in 2019, and we're just over 8,000. So the concern is over, using your model with credits. How does that affect our dealers here? Can you see any disadvantage to us with going with a credit system as far as dealers not providing vehicles for smaller auto or smaller dealerships?
Okay, I don't know if it's would be easier if I go to the presentation back, but I'm gonna try with explain it like this first. The market, as you saw, we categorize the automakers by size. And in our case, a small automakers is less than 4,500 vehicles a year in the province. And there's only a couple that are below that line. Our large automakers sell over 20,000 vehicles a year in the province. But the requirement, the number of credits asked, is applied to the sales. So if they sell 50,000 vehicle, we ask a percentage of credits in function of those sales. So if we're in Prince Edward Island with less sales, the requirement would adjust in function of those real sales in the province. But to be fair to the system, you'd probably have to adjust what is a small, a medium, or a large automakers. I think British Columbia did it. British Columbia put the threshold of a small automaker lower than 4,500 vehicles because their sales in the province of British Columbia are less than they are here. So there's but still the modulation of the requirement by credits is still something that adjusts in function of the market because you put the requirement on the actual sales and then you get those credits with whatever the vehicles. Of course, there's always a worry, and it's the same in Quebec. And I don't know about Prince Edward Island, but it's a lot smaller as a province. But for example, there were worries here in Quebec. Say, well, okay, in Montreal and Quebec City, people might more easily buy electric vehicles than in the northern part where there's no infrastructure. And we're fine with that in a way. It's normal that the market in the urban areas develop faster, but eventually, if we take the requirements being more and more and more and more important, it will force the market to sell those cars not only in the cities but in the rural regions too. So of course it doesn't, a ZEV mandate doesn't, in the way it's designed, doesn't ask for each dealership to sell vehicles. It asks for the automakers to sell enough vehicles for the credits. And then they put them where they think they're going to sell. So that's because there was a questioning: should we ask the dealers for the credits, or should we ask the automakers? And that was one of the reasons we went with the dealer, the automakers, because it's not true that every part of the province of Quebec is as well equipped to have those vehicles as everyone else. So we were perfectly okay thinking, okay, we know, we are aware that they're going to sell better in the cities, but eventually, as the infrastructure spreads, it's going to be more easier for people to get maybe a plug-in hybrid in a region. But we knew it would be a process. And as a warning or so, if you try to implement a ZEV mandate, you need to have done everything you have to do before that to show your consumers that you're going to support them. It's not, we don't think it's a magical, you cannot just put a ZEV market and think it's going to solve the problems of people adopting those vehicles. You need education, you need the infrastructure, you still need rebates because, or something to incentivize the vehicles, since the incremental cost is still different from a gas powered vehicle. So it comes as an help to push the supply side, but it's not magical in itself. That's our opinion.
Sydney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for that. You're making the case for a credit system more advantageous for a place like PEI, the same as it would have been, I'm sure, in rural Quebec, where you don't want dealers punished by not being able to get new vehicles, new zero-emission vehicles on the lot. It puts the onus on that manufacturer, and then they're forced out that way. And I appreciate your comments about you're okay, if the smaller areas are perhaps slower to adapt just because of charging infrastructure, all those types of things, because it puts the onus on private industry and government to come up with that kind of infrastructure to catch up as well. I'm trying to think, you've done a good job of this. I'm trying to think of answering the questions that those that would be hesitant about this type of legislation in PEI. I'm trying to get the answer to those questions. Is there anything else you can offer to a jurisdiction the size of us. Like, and I'm thinking of examples of rural dealerships in Quebec.
Of what they were worried about, what they were looking into, what they asked of us. Well, they were worried about. There's always the argument. We sell what the people want. We want to follow the market. And if they want pickup trucks and if they want SUVs, that's what we want to sell. But when you have people that do have electric cars, they loved it. They love them, and so. I think you don't have to. You have to be if you decide to go towards electrification, if you make that choice as a province, you need to and you see what's is coming. You know, California announced a couple of weeks ago that they want to be all new sales in 2035 would be all electric cars, not even plug-in hybrids. And that's in Norway is at 82% right now of electric cars sold in the new vehicle sales. So if you want to push the market this way, the dealership will push back. I think they do, but you have to make them understand that, okay, maybe people are hesitant, as you say, they don't know the vehicles, but it's a good idea to work on the everything that has to do with education, and say if you bring those cars, they will buy them. There are a lot of people that are waiting, even here, for those cars, and the world is going towards electrification. And if you don't put a ZEV market in place in PEI, well, maybe they won't bring those cars because it's not regulated. The RAV4, the new little SUV, the plug-in RAV4 is in Canada for the moment is only sold in Quebec. It would probably be also in British Columbia when their mandate kicks in. But for the moment, the only place where they're selling it is here. And it's not because we're nicer, it's because they have requirements and they need those credits. So we do think that the ZEV mandate is to help the consumers. They might not like it at dealers, but it brings the car in the province for the consumers.
And just to add, before we implemented the ZEV standard, dealerships were afraid that you're going to force us to sell electric cars that nobody wants, and people won't want to buy that, so they will go in Ontario and New Brunswick to buy their cars because we won't sell any internal combustion engine cars. So we're going to lose our market, we're going to lose our sales. But since the ZEV mandate is in place, it's the opposite that we see. We don't have enough electric cars. There's like waiting lists for in some dealership for many months before people can get their car. So we didn't see we didn't see people going outside of the province to buy ICE vehicles. The problem is opposite. We still don't have enough electric cars, even if we have the ZEV mandate in place.
Sydney?
Thank you, Chair. And just one more question. I know you have other people on your list. Yeah, you raise a good point. Consumers could be, you could almost call it being punished in a way here in Prince Edward Island if automakers are pulling their zero-emission vehicles to other jurisdictions that have this legislation, so our choice could be limited that way. And I'll follow up on Steve's question again about light-duty trucks, and I know our sales are increasing of trucks certainly here in Prince Edward, and I know yours are too, which is interesting. Even though you've brought this legislation in, do you see that changing, or is that simply an implication of the automakers not coming quickly enough with zero emission vehicles in the light duty truck category?
I do think that it's gonna get better when as you say, those models come in, the light duty truck electrics or the SUV electrics. It's gonna be, but still the trend, I think it's a heavy trend. And unfortunately, there's not a lot that can reverse that kind of trend. And about maybe if you tax or put a disincentive on bigger vehicles, which we do not have at the moment. We would like to as professionals, but we're trying to we're trying to convince our government. But still, we'll see how it goes. But for the moment, the trend is still there towards bigger vehicles. Unfortunately, it's but we'll see, and we hope to reverse it, and we hope also there's a lot of things to be done in the future. We hope with shared mobility. Maybe more in urban settings, but all of those car share programs trying to push on, because it's changing one car for one car is not the end all of saving GHG. The best way to do it is to change the way people move, the way people do their transportation. So hopefully we can move towards public transit and all of those things. So, and what is the future? We don't know. Will with the autonomous car change a market? Can one street share a car and share? We don't know. So it's going fast. But at the same time, those big automakers are like big ships, and they're trying to turn, but it's not as fast as we maybe would like.
And if I can add to that, we see on the European market, they don't have a ZEV mandate, but they have really stricter GHG emission regulations, and we see that that's what's driving the market right now. So they're really strict over there. So all the manufacturers, like they announced new vehicles, new SUVs, plug-in SUVs, and all-electric SUVs and trucks, but they are only available on the European or in the China market for the first 1 or 2 or 3 years, and after that they plan to get them in North America. So I think in the long term, if we have stricter regulations, not just in Quebec but in all of North America, I think it will encourage the automakers to make those vehicles available in our market sooner. So instead of filling the European market, so if we have stricter rules, we will see those cars or SUVs or light trucks coming here sooner. That it's the case at the moment. That's
a good point. Hal?
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'd like to start by thanking both of you for making time to make this presentation to us today. Now, while there's an incentive for automakers to engage in this program, are there any sort of disincentives for those who choose not to?
If they are if they are regulated, if they have, if they are in medium or large automakers, if they don't get those credits, and we end a conformity period, every missing credit is a $5,000 fine for each missing credit. So that's why you saw in the presentation, there's a table at some point. Some automakers bought credits. They bought credits from others because they didn't want to pay the fine, and they didn't. There's also the corporative image, especially for some directly from the mouth of the automakers. there's another component. If there's a regulation, it's in there. They want to respect the regulation. It's a question of honor for some automakers. So the disincentive, if you do not do what is asked of you by the ZEV regulation, is the fine, is the redevance, we say in French. So it's and if it's $5,000 by credits. So, but we didn't have to issue any fine for the moment because they went and bought credits from other automakers. And the small automakers, there's a couple of them that are not regulated that decided to sell credits, but there's a couple that are not regulated and have electric vehicle and just didn't bother coming into the credit market. And there's no penalty for them. They have no requirement.
Thank you, Chair. And you answered my next question, which was about if there was any fines levied. But I'm going to move on to, so with the acceleration of this program in Quebec, you talked about infrastructure earlier in the rural areas, and that the focus was kind of on the urban areas. I guess what I'm trying to say is, with that demand, has the installation of pump recharge stations been accelerated?
Yeah, still, as you know, we have Hydro-Québec, which is our crown-based, utility. And the government of Quebec gave to Hydro-Québec the mandate to expand the charging stations. So they've done it on highways, and they've done it on touristic regions. So there's a sort of a ratio of a number of stations by car that are registered that they're trying to keep on. I don't precisely know what is this ratio, but there's sort of a ratio that is there. They try to keep up. They announced when 1,600 new ultra-fast charging station for the next couple of years. So yes, we are aware that the infrastructure is vital, and it will be. Of course, you have to be aware that the more the new cars come out with, let's say, 400 kilometers or 500 kilometers of range, the less you need infrastructure, because people can charge at home and do their week, and then or charge once every 2-3 days. But they're still very important. And in Quebec, the market, the 74,000 vehicles that were sold, or I think we're near 80 now, 80,000 vehicles sold, a lot of them have been by people with homes. And a lot of them put a charger at home, and there's incentives for that. So there've been money to help those people get those their charging station. So there's sort of a parallel thing going on. There are people having those stations at home, but they still ask for the public charging station, for the range anxiety. What if I need to charge? And there's been a program also for workplace stations. So if you charge at home, go work, charge them there, come back, charge home, you won't go on the public charging stations for everyone else. But what is going to be more and more and more important, and what we're trying very hard to work on, is the charging station with multi-housing dwellings. Because that's going to be a problem, because those people cannot necessarily put their own charging station. Even in condos, it can be difficult with the boards and the requirement. So it's what we need and what we want to work on is to put more charging stations on the streets, the curbside charging, more charging in the multi housing dwellings. We changed the construction code, so every new building built that has, I think it's 5 units or less, but they have to ready the electrical wiring, not necessarily put the charging station, but have the wiring ready to have one. Now we need to expand that for bigger multi residential dwelling or even office buildings. So there's a lot of work to do for the infrastructure, of course. But it's something that we are working on.
Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. So the credits that we have in your system, they have no set or minimum value. It's just whatever the dealers or the automakers want to exchange them for, and obviously they're not going to pay any more than the $5,000 penalty it would represent. That's that correct? Yeah. Another question I have just related to that is, as we talked about, PEI is a tiny market compared to Quebec. And if the automakers don't want to comply, is it setting that threshold of penalty high enough that they're going to want to comply? Is that the key there? I just wonder if they'll give us the kind of attention that Quebec gets as far as a market goes, whether they'll care about complying or not.
Well, that was a questioning from the dealership. They were saying we were going to have to put that amount of penalty into the price of all our cars. So all the cars will go up because we're going to internalize that price of those credits. It might be true. It might even be true because they're buying credits from someone else and they have a less margin of profit on SUVs because they're buying credits for the requirement. It could be, but I'd be curious to know if high threshold can be more of an incentive to get it right, to respect the requirements. But the honor part I was talking about earlier, I didn't want to name him, but you probably know who I'm talking about. Even one credit would be too much. Making one error is too much. So I think a lot of automakers will comply even with a $5,000 penalty, but it could be done to put it higher because their corporative image is important. So saying that we do not comply once it's there, they have a problem with that. Before the movie theaters closed, I remember one of the previews was an ad by Ford saying the future is electric. And they're trying very hard to have a green image because they know it's, and when we talk with them, they are aware, and when they write to us, when we do the regulation, they want to be taken as a part, and that's what I think how we need to address them as a part of the solution. They have to help us, do better. And they're saying we are doing better. We are trying to make better cars, but give us time. And we're just trying to push them a bit faster.
And just to add, I think for them to be good corporate citizen, I think it's really important for them, for their image, for the marketing aspect of it. And you said that, like, since the fine is $5,000, you won't go over there. But I think even at that price, if the credits are less available, they're getting more cars on the market, I think some of them will agree to pay more than $5,000 a credit if it means that they will respect the requirement of the regulation. I think they would prefer to pay a little more than to say that it goes on the market and they say that we pay a fine because we didn't respect the land regulation. So I think some of them, if the credits were really scarce on the market, they would agree to pay more than $5,000 just to protect their cooperative image.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Do you have any concept or any access to find out what that market kind of an average price that these credits are being traded for, or is that outside of your guys' view?
No, we tried to look at their financial report, like if you go, I'm going to name them. If you go on the Tesla and you look at their revenues for a lot of years, if we go until 2016 or 17, they only survived because they sold credits in the California market.
Wow.
They would have been in the red, like losing a lot of money if they didn't sell those credits. Oh, am I okay? Sorry. So and then I tried to look into their financial report to see if we could divine a bit how much they're selling them. And the thing is that there's not only credits for ZEV credits, there are also credits for the pollutants in the United States, and there's also credits in Canada for the GHG regulation that's federal based. So they have credit revenue from multiple sources, so I cannot pinpoint which could be the revenues from the Quebec ZEV mandate. So we were not able to decipher it. But if we look in the early days of the credit market, when it was more clear cut, I think someone did a review on that, and they were estimating them at $3,500 for 1 credits, because the $5,000 penalty is the same in California, by the way, but they're in US dollars. But it's $5,000 per credit is the same penalty.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. So if I'm getting this right, and a high enough kilowatt-hour electric vehicle was sold for the full 4 credits, they'd be avoiding $20,000 in fines, and we also have a federal incentive in place to purchase those vehicles, and in Quebec you have a provincial incentive on top of that to buy those vehicles. So it sways everything quite far to we want to sell some more electric vehicles or get them into the market side of things. How important do you think the incentive side of things is as a sister or a component of the zero emission vehicle mandate?
That's a very good question, and when we're trying to convince everyone, we all saw what happened in Ontario when they took away the rebate. I think you might have noticed before the federal rebate kicked in May of the other year. There was a couple of months where there was nothing in Ontario. They went from $14,000 to nothing, and the sales dropped by over 90%. And it stayed down for months and months and months. Eventually, when the federal incentive came in, the sales went up again. Now, as you say, you have the 5,000 by the federal. We have 8,000 for an electric vehicles. The automakers that bring it in can have credits that it can resell. So there's another incentive for the automaker. But we do still think that the incremental price, when the consumer, he doesn't know about the ZEV credit. The ZEV credit is not even in his mirror. So when he goes into a dealership and he sees 2 cars, and for the moment, one is like $15,000 higher than the other one, for some people, early adopters or people that have been educated on the total cost of ownership, they might go to the electric vehicle anyway, even if the difference in price is very high. But for the regular folks, they will only see the price tag. So we do think that for the moment, the incentive is still quite important, but we are optimists that that incremental price will shrink in the future years, faster for some segments than others, because the vehicle with a bigger battery might be still more expensive, a bit longer. Vehicle with smaller batteries will reach parity faster. But until parity is obtained, we do think the incentive is still important. But the ZEV mandate is to bring those cars, bring them in the dealership, more than so that the consumer has the choice. Because there's nothing less fun than a consumer that comes into a dealership, says, I want to try I saw your electric vehicles. Oh, we don't have one. We cannot make you try one. And a lot of people want to try it before they buy it. So it's more to bring the cars. The ZEV mandate is more to bring the cars than to, and the rebate, we still see it important, not to cover all of the incremental price, but we think if you manage to go halfway between the price of the electric car and the ICE, if you can cover half of it, may it be a combination of the federal incentive and yours, you have a better chance of selling those cars. Because again, if you bring them in the dealership with the ZEV market and people don't want to buy them, they're stuck with them. But we don't see it, and we think the incentive is part of why we don't see it, because people are buying them. They're buying them for the moment.
Steve.
Thank you, Chair. So we got the incentives as the carrots, and we've got the ZEV mandate as the stick to get the market to where we want to kind of see it go. And as the parity comes along, then we don't need so much of a carrot to get things moving. So very good. And I can testify to the fact that you can walk into a dealership here and ask for a particular electric vehicle model that should be available, and be told that we can't get that for you. It's just not going to be available, period. So yeah, thank you for your presentation.
It was a pleasure.
And I just have a couple of final questions. Most of my questions have been asked by my colleagues, so that's fantastic. This has been really useful for us, actually. It's answered a lot of questions that I personally had around whether or not this should be done on the dealership level or at the manufacturer level, and I can see the rationale for the decision that you've made, actually. I'm curious, I know you didn't experience this, but if you did have an automaker that was non-compliant, would that non-compliance be made public?
Yes, it didn't happen, but we do publish a report each year where we put a portrait of how many credits each automaker has. And if at the end of the period, as it was last September 2018, it was the report is always a year later, because we give them the time to sell those vehicles. So for the model year 2018, we had the cut point in September 19, and we published the report in the winter. It would have been in the report that this one didn't comply. It would have been there. And in Quebec, we do sometimes sort of where there's non-compliance or important non-compliance, there are sometimes press releases and stuff like that. I don't know if it would have gone there, but it could be. But it would show somewhere that someone didn't comply.
Which is certainly enough of an incentive for most manufacturers to not want to make that list. I can certainly understand that. A couple of my colleagues spoke about some of the challenges for dealerships to get in vehicles, and perhaps a need for some infrastructure upgrades in order to do that. And I was just curious if you knew if either the province or the manufacturers offered any programs to support dealerships as they made these changes.
Yes, very interesting question. And we were told early on that it's when we talk to the automakers, is saying we each have our own like classes for dealerships for the sellers, and we, as for example, as automakers, we won't make every dealer sell electric vehicles. We'll select them, and they're going to be our champions. So let's say there's an automaker who has 5 garages here. It's 5 dealers in the Quebec City, and there's only one is going to get the electric vehicles. Well, it's their choice. It's their marketing strategy. But the automakers will say, we're going to take in charge how we do the education of our own dealers. We say, okay, well, if that's how you want to do it, you can do it. But then, as I was saying earlier, the dealership association, who has probably, I think they represent over 90% of all new car dealerships. They have over 800 members. Okay, so they have pretty much every dealership. They decided with an environmental group to put together, they started by a sort of class where there was a teacher that would go in dealerships to give like electric vehicle 101, like what is an electric vehicle, what is a plug-in hybrid, how do they work, how can we sell them better. And that was their first iteration. And then they decided, no, we want to do an online class. So they develop modules. They have online learning modules. And it's the dealership with the environmental group that they did it together. They did it shorter, more jazzy, more punched, so that the sellers can be in their office. Oh, I have no client right now. I'm going to go on the computer, do my online class on this part of the program. So we found it very interesting that the dealership association decided to do that and unparalleled with what the automakers do, because of course Kia will have a class for their Kia dealers, and Honda will have too. But by themselves, the dealership association put something together, and we, as I said, we meet with them twice a year, and they decided to do the electric vehicle week. And then all dealership, they have appliance all over the province. Say, okay, we have 80 dealers. We're going to do ride-alongs, and we're going to do this, and we were trying to do a splash. And so it's interesting to see how the market itself sort of got into it to help the movement along.
I appreciate that answer. Thank you very much. I noticed in your early slides that our percentage of emissions related to transportation is very similar to yours. So I understand the push to want to make these switches. I am certain that's where the drive comes from on our end as well. And I was just curious if you had a sense of the emissions reductions related to this change.
For the moment, it's a bit too soon, because we have 80,000 electric vehicles on the road. That's 1.3% of all cars. So it's still a tiny fraction. But if we push the ZEV mandate harder in the future years, and the renewal, because we estimate that the car stays on the road 12 to 15 years. If we push towards the electric vehicles in the future years, Then if we renew the fleet, then we'll see reductions. But at very short time, it's hard to see it. But we do think that if we push towards, let's say, British Columbia put in their law that they want to go to 100% sales in 2040. Or California said we want to go 100% sales in 2035. If we push toward 100% in 2035, we think that in 2030 would be what, Frédéric? 11% reduction in GHG, maybe, because the turnover starts. But then when you're in 2040, then the vehicles have changed, and then you see enormous reductions. But at the start, it's a slow going curve because it's only a small number of vehicles, but eventually it's gonna do like a snowball effect.
Yeah, because for now, all the gains we do with electric vehicles, they're canceled by the sales of more SUVs and trucks. So all the gains that we do, we'll lose them. So even with the regulation right now, we don't see a lower GHG level. It's still going up or maybe stable, but in the long term, we say that the life cycle of a vehicle is about 12 years. So we say, like, if we aim for, I don't know, 100% in 2030 or 2035. So if we say 2035 and we say there's a 12 year life cycle, so we'd say like in 2040 or 2045, we would get close to zero emission. But for now, we mainly just compensate for the sales of SUVs. And in 2030, if we have a stricter rule, yeah, maybe a reduction of about, I don't know, like 1/3 of what we have right now. So, but it goes rapidly after that, because it's not like in the industry. If every year you work to just gain 1% efficacy. Like once the electric car takes the place of an ICE vehicle, so the work is done. So it's done, and it's done for good. So it's quite hard at the beginning, but in the end, we can see great results.
And frankly, we absolutely have to get started, even if the early GHG emissions are small. If we don't have that framework in place for later, then we can't see those big reductions. So I still think it's important work. I think for a jurisdiction like ours that is considering this, it was particularly useful to hear about the supporting pieces that are necessary to make this successful. I was really interested when you spoke of building code adjustments to allow for that infrastructure down the road. I think that's a really good idea that's worth considering, and also speaking to the rebate side of it is really important. I appreciate that. I suppose the one final question I have for you, and I'll make sure, then I do see my colleagues also have another one for you. But I'm just curious, with having gone through this process already, what advice would you give to a new jurisdiction that is taking up this challenge, having already had your own lessons on it?
Well, I think being ambitious is not a bad thing. We were cautious because we were in the first to go in the market and we were the first in Canada to do it. And but it has advantages being cautious and doing as the other did, because it was not something completely new. So that was a good. It was easier to ease in. It was a way to ease in using a regulation that's elsewhere. But the market goes so fast, and those vehicles their range are going up so much faster than we thought. Going 4 credit for one car, it's getting a lot of credits on the market, and the requirements in return are easy to obtain. So I'd say that one lesson learned would be, and it's hard to explain. Oh no, we're not asking for vehicle sales. We're asking for credits, and one car can give 4 credits. So one thing that I would recommend is trying to make it more streamlined, more instinctive on what is required from the industry. So if your goal is a percentage of sale, maybe design your thing this way, but then be aware that every time you try to change something like this or a huge change, you have pushback from the industry. So it's a balancing act between what you want to obtain as results and how can you still get the industry to work with you. So that's one thing. Not forget, as we said, and you mentioned, what surrounds the ZEV mandate. It's not magical. So the infrastructure, the education, the buildings, the rebates, if you can give some, that's all important things. To keep a good communication with the auto industry, I think it's a good one. Some are more proactive than others, of course, and sometimes the association might have a position, but some of their members will say, well, we can do more. So you have to listen to the people you are working with. And so that's a bit, and the early action credits, be careful not to give too much early action credits. I think it's a good thing to recognize what the industry has done. I think it's fair to do so. But when you do, be aware of how much pressure you're going to put on your future results. Because as you saw, we had a requirement of 15,000 credits and they got over 50. So there were a lot of excess credits that they didn't really need. And they're just going to hinder the future progress of the mandate here. So it's okay to recognize the work, but you have to find a way to do it without undermining your own results, future results.
Thank you for that. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I could probably ask you guys questions for hours, but one of the things I'd like to drill in on, you touched on it on your closing remarks there, or when Lynn asked you some of the things that we should be aware of, and it's keeping communications open with the industry. I heard you mention earlier that you have a committee with members from both the dealers and an environmental group, and I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about how that plays out.
Yeah, okay. So at the first, when we were putting in place the regulation, around the table we had the industry, being the big automakers, manufacturers with their association, and Tesla was not in those group, and the dealerships, the association of the dealership. We were around the table with those people. And then when the regulation went public, the dealership themselves saying, I think we need to have another space to talk with you without the automakers, because they were worried, as you mentioned, as we talked about this afternoon, what if the automakers won't sell the vehicles in the province here and gonna sell them elsewhere, and I'm losing my clients to the other side of the border. So we want to talk with you, Minister of Environment. We want to talk with you without the automakers there. We want to talk to you as dealers. And that was a request made by the Dealership Association and the environmental groups to the minister at that point. So, and one of the big, and so there's like two environmental group and the dealership, the association that came to be on that committee. And then the automakers said, why aren't we there? we said, well, we're reading you on the other side. We didn't say they don't want you there, but it was a bit that. So we put together that group, and so we have a member of two different environmental associations. Well, one is an association of EV owners. One is an environmental group, and one is the dealership association. And we meet them like twice a year. And what we do on those meetings is, like, for example, this winter we had the report coming out on the compliance of every automakers, and we did a meeting with the automakers, and we talked about that with them. And then we did a meeting with the other group, with the dealership and the environmental groups, and of course we didn't have the same feedback. The automakers would say, well, yeah, we managed, but it's going to be difficult now because the credits requirement are going up. And then the environmental group, do you think it wasn't too easy? Maybe we should do something about this. But what I really like with the committee, with the dealership and the environmental group, is how they connected together and they're working together very closely. All of those capsules I was talking about for the education of the dealers, it's made in collaboration with that environmental group. So, and when they do the electric vehicle week, they work together. So I think it brought them closer, and we're really interesting. And they will, in those meetings, they will say, okay, so now we're doing this formation, we're doing this promotion thing, and we're more in the listening mode for the moment, but always with, if you have any concerns, for example, do you detect that, for example, when it comes to selling fleet vehicles, it's done in Toronto instead of being done in Quebec? Do you perceive that? So we asked them to bring us problems. They didn't for the moment. So we're just pretty much exchanging on what they're doing to further the market.
Steve?
Very good. So what is, if the committee comes to a decision, what happens with that decision?
It's more of a consult. It's more a consult thing. So for example, now we have to do a report in January to explain to the Quebec government, the National Assembly, how it's going. And then it's an advisory sort of position. So there's not, they will, as anyone, give their input, and then we'll put in the report the maybe use some of their suggestions, but they're not, they will probably tell us if they want something changed, but they wouldn't have decision power in itself. It's more an advisory relationship.
Instead of steering committee. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. So how did the committee itself form? Did they express interest in this committee being formed, or did you go forward and ask certain organizations to be a part of the committee?
They asked the minister, and I was informed while going to the Prince conference. So they said, hey, Marilou, we have a committee. Oh, we do. Okay. So that was it, how it formed. They specifically requested a committee to the minister who put it in place.
That's good, Chair.
Sydney?
But it's been a good idea.
Thank you, Chair. When you were creating the formula for the credits, was that an internal process? Did you go external to help with that? Like that consultative process that happened, can you just speak to that? And also, if you were doing it again, would you have this advisory council in place before you did that?
We could have made the advisory council before and everything that has to do with the consultation, because there's the legislative process at the various phase where we ask for comments. So we had it without the committee being there, we heard those voices anyway. We received memoirs and we received letters, and we met with people during the implementation. So we might not have had the committee at first, but we still heard those voices while doing the process. I think it would be a good idea to put it in place before even starting the process and to have the dialogue going. When it comes to the formula for the credits, that's one of the things that we copy and paste from California. That formula is exactly the same as the American one. The only thing is that we put a factor in because they use miles and we use kilometers. So we just made a conversion by adding a little number in there. So it's, when I said that we put in place the regulation that was in California, that's one of the pieces. We use the same credit requirements, apart the first 2 years where we ramped up a bit slower. But from 2020 and up, it's the same credit requirement. It's the same formula to calculate the credits by car. It's the same maximum amount of credits by car for credits for ZEV or 1.3 for low emission vehicles. That is really copy and paste from California. So we had absolutely no input on that, on those formula. We know, though, that before 2017, the American, so those are the formula there. So the 0.6214 is just to go from miles to kilometers. That's the only difference. In California, the range is put in miles, and here we put in the range in kilometers. The 0.6214 is only the conversion for the different unit. But that, with the formula plus 0.5, all of this is exactly the same as California, and for the low emission vehicles too. So before 2008, that system is in place in California since model year 2018 too. Before that, they had a ZEV mandate. There was a ZEV mandate from that used a different approach between 2009 and 2017, where instead of having a formula, they had a number of credits by type of vehicle. And it was controversial because you could be at one end of the spectrum saying, well, my vehicle has 200 kilometers and I only have 1 credit. As I had 201 kilometers, I could have 2 credits. So we followed California on that point. And now we would really like to know how they will do their future alliteration of the ZEV mandate in the future years, but they haven't disclosed that for the moment. So we might have to see what we'll do in the future ourselves, because we think that formula is very generous.
Thank you.
And I see no further questions from my committee members. So with that, I will thank you so much for taking the time to present to us today. I know we've kept you for quite a long time, but this has been incredibly helpful from our end. So thank you so much for taking the time today. And I will just have a very short recess while we transition. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And write to us if you wish. Okay, bye.
Okay, thank you, bye.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Special Committee on Climate Change. Up next on our agenda, item 4, a request to present to committee. So in your package in front of you, you will see a letter from Reg Phelan. As I understand it, Reg was scheduled to present to us when we were doing our road shows. I believe it was going to be in Morel that he had intended to present, but unfortunately due to COVID, we had to stop those. Reg is asking to present to the committee. His letter says, I was booked to present to the Committee on Climate Change in the spring and was canceled due to COVID. I'm still interested in doing this presentation. I feel there's a great opportunity with sustainable agriculture to lower the greenhouse gas effect in PEI. I would be presenting by myself. I have worked closely with the National Farmers Union, and we have a recent publication on climate change. I have done a thesis on the history of land on PEI. This has been published and is available online. Is the committee interested in hearing from Reg? Yes. Fantastic. So that's a decision. Check. The next item on my agenda is, suggested expert witnesses on climate change. We had reached out to the Yale Climate Connection for suggestions on possible presenters who would be able to speak to us on climate change and agriculture. The 2 suggestions that came back were Cynthia and John Foley. Is it okay with the committee if we go ahead with booking both of those presentations? Yes, fantastic. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a review of scheduling and the work plan. Perhaps I will ask the clerk to go over that with us.
Certainly. So in terms of scheduled meetings after this week, next Thursday, the 22nd, the committee will have a briefing by the California Department of Food and Agriculture on their Healthy Soils program. Obviously via video conference as well. On October 29th, the committee will have the PEI Climate Change Secretariat appearing to give a progress update on the PEI Climate Change Action Plan. On November 5th, the Department of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy will brief the committee on the Sustainable Transportation Action Plan and Sustainable Communities Initiative. Those are the scheduled meetings at the moment. You can see in your work plan summary document in front of you that there are some other requests that the committee has put out that I don't yet have dates for. And then also on the second page of that work plan summary, there are briefings the committee had asked for prior to the pandemic, but did not manage to complete in time. So if the committee wishes, I can pursue scheduling those as well.
And clerk, while we're on it, are you able to advise the committee on any information the Climate Change Secretariat has sent us since our request in June?
Well, the committee's original request in June did receive a reply, I think in July. Then the committee sent another letter back to the Climate Change Secretariat in September, which should be in your memo in front of you, that letter. The committee has not received a reply to that September letter yet.
So we still do not have the carbon abatement costing information sent to us, is that correct?
That's correct.
So committee members, that will certainly make it difficult, if not impossible, for us to file our final report in time for the fall sitting of the legislature. So in order to make final costed recommendations on how to reach the greenhouse gas emission targets that were changed last year, we actually need the carbon abatement costs to make those recommendations in a costed fashion. We requested them in July. Not having them at this point means that's probably not possible. So for us to make those recommendations in November. So I'm curious if the committee would like to continue booking presentations from various organizations into January after the House rises with the goal of making recommendations in the spring, or what is the thoughts of, Sunny?
Timeline? There was no timeline on this, was there?
There is no timeline associated with this committee. The Poverty Committee did have an end date. We did not. Sunny?
We could have we could have some type of report to table this session, asking for further time for our final report in the spring.
Steve, and then Hal?
We did have a presentation from Transition Energetic Quebec that mentioned that they had a list, like a fairly detailed list of carbon abatement costs. I wonder if we could follow up with that. I know they sent us some information, but it didn't have the abatement costs in it, so I wonder if we could specifically ask them for that.
I would definitely be in favor of that. Is that any other discussion from the committee on asking Quebec for their carbon abatement costs? Supportive? Consensus? Thank you. Hal?
Just on, so this is a special committee, and we don't have an end date. So generally, could this go on for years? You know, because I mean, there are quite a few committees, 9 or 10 committees right now, including the special committees, and I struggle myself with being on 5. Just trying to get some of my constituency work done because I'm on the road. Again, I hate to keep saying it over and over again, but it is a 4-hour drive, commute there and back. Can we decide on a final time?
I empathize with your situation. I absolutely believed we would make our final report in November. I just don't know how we can do that without the carbon abatement costs. I think we know how much we need to lower greenhouse gas emissions by to meet this target. I think we've heard from islanders and from experts all over on pathways to get there, but I think if we're going to make costed recommendations, we actually need the Climate Change Secretariat to give us those numbers. I think if they had provided them in July, we would have been ready to make that final report. I'm really open to suggestions on how to get that information. It would be absolutely my preference to make our report in November. I just don't see that being viable at this point, but open to your thoughts, member.
I don't have any suggestions on how to get it. I mean, I would poke them until they gave up, but I would just like to see it sooner than later.
I share that view. Sydney.
If we had the information within a week, could we start booking meetings to get a report ready?
I would have to look to the committee schedule. I think we do have a number of meetings booked probably into November, but I believe that we could be meeting in early November to start a report. Sydney?
It's my opinion that I would like to have a final report for this fall, like all of us, I'm sure. Can we phone them instead of sending letters? Do you want me to phone them?
Clerk?
I can.
Acknowledge receipt of the letter.
I don't believe I've had any communication from them acknowledging the receipt. If the committee directs me to call them, I can call them. Typically, a letter would be the way the community would communicate to them, but.
Natalie?
So the Climate Change Secretariat is coming here next week to present, correct?
They're coming on October 29th, I believe.
Yeah, okay, so is it fair at that point that we get an update? I would think that.
Oh, I'm sure we'll get an update.
Yeah, no, right, so I mean, I can certainly push it as well on my end, but I think by the 29th, hopefully we'll have some figures.
Yeah, to be fair, when they did respond to us in July 15th, they had indicated that some of the figures would certainly take longer, and I think we expected that, but they did also indicate that a number of those figures could be prepared relatively quickly. So I think we had some assumption that we would be receiving them in July, August, even September, instead of at the end of October. But I would personally be in favor of us following up with the Climate Change Secretariat again to see if they do actually have those figures. If they do, we would be able to start working on our end to get that final report together. But if the first time we see those numbers is 2 weeks from now, I don't know if it's probable that we're going to have a final report tabled in November. But I will look. Sydney.
So Let's ask the clerk, and thank you, Minister, to call whoever's coming to present and say, can we have whatever you have now, those initial numbers, and then also just to confirm, because I'm trying to think where their subject is, but to confirm that they are bringing everything they have for the presentation on the 29th, 24th, 29th, and just so that we have it all.
Yes, to your point, Sydney, the presentation that they're making on the 29th is not on their carbon abatement numbers. Their presentation is on the progress report of our greenhouse gas emission reductions in the province. So,
And that was the request. So just to be clear that we're also looking for the information that we were asking for as well, to bring it that day as well. Make that as part of the presentation.
So I will look to the committee for guidance on this. Do you wish to continue scheduling future meetings in addition to the ones that we have on the docket so far? Or are we going to try to push for a final report? How?
For the latter.
You would prefer
Push
to
for
push
a
for a
final
final
report for this city.
Yes.
Steve.
Push for it, but if we don't have these numbers, there's just simply no way for us to satisfy the outcome
Requirement.
that we're expected. So, I mean, can we schedule things, and then if it's possible, can we cancel appointments after they've been put onto our schedule here, or can we proceed as if we're not going to have this information, because it's been a long time now, and cancel those if indeed we do get the information on time to make a final report?
So perhaps I will suggest, since I believe the will of the committee is to have the final report done as soon as possible, can I suggest that we wait a week for our next climate change committee meeting and see what response the clerk gets when he does indeed follow up with the climate change secretariat, and then we can make a decision based on that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Sydney.
Yeah, that's fair. There's also, we had talked about some of the groups that we have coming, I think, are going to be important to our final recommendations, especially around agriculture, right?
Agree.
And the Living Labs initiative not available until November. It's a tricky one. I want to be done too, and I don't want to be delaying things. But those last three on the list there are still fairly important to our final report. So I will have to reserve my push for to definitely have a report. But we potentially could still get it done by the end of the legislative session anyway. It would be up to the committee to have to do a little bit of extra work during the session, and the clerk.
I would just suggest that.
Sunny?
How do we feel about that? Like, how does the committee members feel about that? If we were to push a little more, like you say, meet during the session to get it done.
Sydney.
Just with the finish this work plan, I feel like we don't need an additional ones, and if there's additional ones, they're written submissions. But we work to get, and then these guys, I guess, can be written submissions as well that are on here, but I think it's important to hear from them.
I believe that the ones we have booked, even if we had our carbon abatement figures now, we could be discussing carbon abatement costs on some of the big chunks that need to go forward. And then once we've heard on the sustainable agriculture side of it, we may have additional recommendations to add to a report, but it's a bit of a moot point at this stage since we don't have those figures. So I will suggest we wait to hear back from the clerk on his conversation with the Climate Change Secretariat and continue on with things. But I feel the preference of the committee is to try to hash out a report during the sitting if necessary to get everything complete. Is that a fair?
Yes.
Fantastic. So with that, do we have any new business? Sydney.
Thank you, Chair. So, clerk, you're going to book in Reg as soon as you can. I know he was booked for one of those meetings. I just wanted to confirm, did we have anybody else that was booked to present at meetings prior to COVID and things being canceled?
Good question.
Yes, as I recall, there were some other people who were booked at meetings that were to be held. Either there was both weather cancellations and then COVID cancellation. And I don't believe Reg Phelan was the only person who was booked and then subsequently canceled. However, he is as far as I can recall, the only person who's since followed up and said, I would still like to come in.
Sydney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I had spoken to Reg too, and he was wondering, he was waiting to see if there would be more public meetings, and because his has to do with the agriculture and soil, I think it's good to have him in to present. I wonder, could we reach out to those that had booked to present to ask them to give written submissions by, and we give them a deadline of, I don't know,
Month
November
end.
1st or something like that, to say the committee will be wrapping up its work. We would still appreciate to hear from you. Could you submit something in writing by, is November 1st too early? I just, you know, I want to still give those people an opportunity, and perhaps they've already submitted written submissions earlier in our process, but had just wanted to follow up in person, but just to give them a chance that they don't all of a sudden see the committee's closed and they never got a chance to give input.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's a good idea. Is the committee supportive of that? Following up to ask for written submissions, hopefully by the beginning of next month. Is that good to go, Clerk? Thank you. Any additional new business that anyone would like to bring forward?
Not really new business. I'm
Steve?
just seeing here we sent out an information request to the PEI Automobile Dealers Association and the Electric Vehicle Association on a potential zero-emission vehicle mandate for PEIs. No response to that as of yet?
I've had some correspondence with them, but they had questions about the request, so I haven't received their feedback in response to the request yet.
Fantastic. Any new items? With that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Hal. Thank you very much, everyone.